Representative Daniel Pate, thank you for joining me for this conversation. I know we talked quite a bit, throughout the sessions, last year, what have you, but I figure we get in here and kind of do a preview of this upcoming session. So how are you feeling about it?
Well, I'm glad to be out of hibernation. Hope everyone stayed warm this past weekend. And so tomorrow we have our big budget hearing for DHS. I've had the honor of serving as the chair of the A&B Human Services Subcommittee for the past year. Learned a lot through that experience. This is my 8th session, so I'm no longer the new kid on the block, and it always reminds me of a sitcom. Anytime there's a new season premiering on TV, if you will. So we'll have a new cast of characters, and I'm sure some interesting storylines play out that you will probably cover throughout the next 4 months. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And so you mentioned right there, this is your 8th year going in here?
I know, yeah, hard to believe.
You mentioned it's kind of like a sitcom. What are you feeling going into this year? Does it feel any different going into this year's?
Well, it's an election year, so I mean that alone will have its own dynamics. But I think given the prevalence of political violence the past few years, it's much more sobering to be in a public elective position. And you think about what happened this past summer alone to our colleagues in Minnesota, for example, and how political violence, unfortunately, it's becoming part of the norm now in the country. And for those of us who put our names on the ballot, ones with family, young family, this should not be the price you have to pay to serve your fellow constituencies and your community members. So I do worry about where we're going to go from here as a country when it comes to getting good people to run for office. I've served for 8 years now. I will have to, quote unquote, retire here in a bit because of term limits. But it's changed drastically. And I think the tone, the temperature, hopefully we can start to decrease it just a little bit this year before the election.
It's going to be a tough task, I would assume, national coverage coming in here, but hopefully it being a state and, mostly dealing with state politics, hopefully that vitriol that kind of comes into national politics don't seep too much through in the state ones.
Yeah, and I think I would also submit the local level as well. There are certain issues that we have to address at these levels of government. And I understand what happens in Washington, D.C., and obviously there's a potential for a government shutdown later this week once again. And being chair of the Human Services Subcommittee, SNAP is one of our largest programs purview. And so last fall, I was constantly on the phones with DHS and trying to be in communication with what exactly was going on. So there's no doubt the decisions in D.C. have a direct impact on us at the state level. But we're going to continue doing our job for our constituents and making sure that we have to pass a balanced budget every single year. That is our #1 constitutional responsibility. And that's going to be a very interesting discussion we have in the months to come.
And so outside of the budget, what would you say are your top priorities going into this 2026 session? Basically kind of your must.
Personally, I would like to see us address the cost of living situation. We saw a few years ago with inflation, the effect it had on our economy, and we're still dealing with the lingering effects of that, and specifically housing. I know for our generation, it's now become the fact that 40 is the median age to be a first-time homeowner, and you think about the American dream and how it's becoming more and more challenging as years go on for people in our age bracket. And so what can we do about affordable housing? That's hopefully something that we can address this session. In addition to a lot of the federal changes that are taking place with H.R. 1. So I mentioned SNAP a few minutes ago, and there are some changes that we made that program, and whether that's work requirements, having more of the administrative cost shifted to the states, or what have you, we'll have to make some decisions on those types of programs as well.
So tell us about the bills that you're planning to file. The filing deadline has already passed, hasn't it?
Correct.
Tell us about the bills you already filed and what bills you plan on co-authoring this session too.
So I've filed a few different bills. So there's one called the Veterans Mental Health Innovation Act, and that's looking at authorizing clinical research into what's called ibogaine. And so I'm sure you know, a few years ago, I've advocated for research into psilocybin and how that can help veterans struggling with PTSD, depression, and Texas just this past year passed this Ibogaine bill, and they are investing in their research projects when it comes to this and helping their citizens. So we live in a military community. I think this has tremendous potential to be a game changer for many folks, and I think it's worth our time and effort just to see, is this potentially going to help people. I think based on the results I've seen and the research I've seen, it's a yes, it will help people, but ultimately make as lawmakers. I've got another bill related to corn masa products, and so within the Hispanic community, Hispanic women, when they give birth, are actually at a high risk of the babies having birth defects, specifically spina bifida, so that deals with the nervous system and with the spine itself not being developed properly. And so that's because of a lack of intake with folic acid within corn masa products. It already requires within wheat products a certain percentage of folic acid, but when it comes to corn products, it's up to each state to decide. So right now, it's about 1,400 babies who were born every year with these types of birth defects, and by passing this type of legislation, we can have 40 to 100 of those babies not be in that situation. So it's a great pro-family measure, and hopefully we can get that one passed. In terms of bills I'm co-authoring, there's one related to the sales tax for diapers and eliminating that within the state of Oklahoma, much like our other states in the region have already done so. I think that's another great pro-family measure. I've got a friend's baby shower coming up next month, and I know like the cost of diapers are quite expensive, especially for a lot of families that are struggling right now. So that's one legislation that can hopefully address that affordability question, that cost of living question that we're all trying to answer across the country.
You have filed, I would say, a decent amount of bills on mental health, whether it's for the armed forces or just in general. I know we spoke to you when the 988 hotline
Yes.
might be going away a little bit later. Do you think some of these issues, especially for the military and these kind of out of norms approach to it, like Ibogaine and psilocybin, do you think might get overlooked at the Capitol sometimes, especially maybe those representatives and state senators who are not within a military community like Lawton Fort Sill?
Well, we live in unconventional times, and I think that requires unconventional solutions and ideas. Hence, my consistent advocacy for things like psilocybin and now Ibogaine research. We have to be creative as policymakers. And to your question about, is it only for those of us who represent constituencies with military backgrounds, I would submit that mental health is prevalent in Oklahoma and frankly the United States, and that's urban and rural communities as well. Since COVID, I think there has been less stigma associated with mental health, so that if you need to see a counselor, if you are struggling, that we're more open about having those conversations. And I am a big proponent of 988. I think it's saved so many countless lives. A resource that has to continue on. You are correct that it's set to expire at the end of September when it comes to federal funding. And so one of our colleagues in the House, Representative Kevin Norwood, he has over 30 years of experience in this field, and he knows the importance of 988. So he's filed a bill to create a state fund to make sure that funding is continued past this September. So absolutely, with mental health, that's critical that we get that right. I know today there was supposed to be a luncheon. The Lawton Fort Sill Chamber had to be canceled with the weather, and we were gonna hear from Commissioner Savanik, and I appreciate his leadership during the past several months. As you know, there was some financial mismanagement that we uncovered through our responsibility as good stewards of the taxpayers' money. And that was unfortunate that in this agency where it has a very vital mission, that was going on the past several years. So I'm glad there's been accountability put forward in the agency with, and that's part of the budget conversation as well this session in terms of what do they need truly to make sure their mission is successful.
You're also, I would say, really well versed on technology, AI, or at least really interested in it. Do you see any sort of connection between AI and mental health in terms of maybe what it can be used for, or are you seeing any policies being developed in that sort of space?
So when it comes to AI in general, I'm more the viewpoint that it has tremendous potential for us as a society. Much like with the internet, when that was first introduced in the 1990s, I do think it's a game changer for industry you can imagine, from education to the media, what have you. It can really make a huge difference when it comes to how we get information, how we analyze information, and beyond that. So I do think there is a role for the states to play. I understand that the administration issued an executive order placing a moratorium on any legislation at the state level. I disagree with that. I think it is a state's issue, and Congress is going to pass a comprehensive AI bill. That would be great, but here we are a few days away from a potential government shutdown once again. So if they can't even pass a budget, how can we expect them to pass something as complicated as AI policies? So I think we need to take the lead as state lawmakers. And I do believe in having some guardrails in place. So another colleague, Representative Cody Maynard, has introduced a few bills and trying to do exactly that. When it comes to the relationship with healthcare, I think with telemedicine, you've already seen since COVID the progress and the breakthroughs that have happened because of AI and technology, so that if you're in a smaller community where you don't have ready access to a hospital, for instance, at least you can communicate with a physician or a nurse and get the assistance you need. I do think that has tremendous potential when it comes to healthcare and improving access to those vital services. But we need to continue on with this exploration process as policymakers with a decision based on the executive order to try to put a hold on some of these discussions and breakthroughs we're making. That's something that I just really disagree with.
Something that goes right along with AI is our data centers.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of I guess, unknowns, or some people are scared of data centers and what they might mean for the environment in terms of water usage, what have you. I believe Lawton today is going to talk about a possible data center, or just talk about, some can do to maybe attract or to help support data centers in the community. What are your views on data centers?
And I know to our neighbors in the Northeast near Pryor, Google has made substantial investments in that community and partnering with OU and OSU to further advance a lot of these programs when it comes to AI. And so I understand the concerns and some of the fears around data centers. Certainly, we don't want any adverse effects on our local environment. We don't want a dramatic increase in our utility rates. And so one of our delegation members, Representative Brad Bowles, he has filed legislation on trying to prevent utility rates from being adversely affected because of the creation and construction of data centers around the state. And this is a conversation that's happening nationally too. So on the one hand, we want to make sure we're investing in AI and making sure the technology continues to develop in a sophisticated way. On the other hand, you don't want to negatively affect local economies. So there is a trade-off that we have to make sure we balance correctly. I think that's what we're trying to find this session and more likely next session as this issue continues to become more prevalent. But I think this one is an issue that we have to keep an eye out for.
When you think about Southwest Oklahoma specifically, do you think or feel there are any needs that are maybe underaddressed at the Capitol? I'm assuming there are maybe a lot of eyes on the city, Tulsa, the big areas where there's a lot of senators kind of looking after them. Do you think there's any needs in Southwest Oklahoma that needs to be a little bit more addressed at the Capitol?
Well, I would submit that having the House Appropriations Chair with Representative Trey Caldwell in that position, that helps tremendously. And he's done an excellent job advocating for Southwest Oklahoma. Most notably, the fact that Frederick is on track to once again have a functioning hospital. That was because and persistence. So I think we are at the table. We are at the decision-making table, and we have our voices heard, whether it is access to quality health care, access to quality broadband, high-speed internet. And I think with our growing investment in FISTA, Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell has always said that Lawton should be in the same sentence, not the same paragraph, as Oklahoma City and Tulsa. And so I think we're telling is truly a great story to share with the rest of the state and frankly the rest of the country. Whenever I've had the honor of representing Oklahoma on the national and international stage, I always talk about Lawton Fort Sill and FISTA and the Wichita Mountains and Medicine Park, and how this is a pretty unique part of the state, and we have a lot to be proud of. And so hopefully that story continues to be told by me and the rest of our colleagues in the Southwest delegation.
We always hear about the governor, Speaker of the House, Majority Leader, Senate Minority Leader, but you mentioned how Trey Caldwell is the Appropriations Chair. How important is it to have people in Southwest Oklahoma be in those leadership positions that maybe not, get spoken about a lot, but definitely has a lot of power within the legislature? How important is that? And you can speak towards your own committee assignments as well within that answer.
In politics, I've always thought that there are two types of politicians. You have show ponies. They always kind of go for the headlines, their personal glory. Then you have workhorses. And I consider myself a workhorse. I actually don't like being in the spotlight personally, which is ironic being on your show right now. I don't really like talking about myself, and I don't think that's really the role of an elected official. It's truly to serve your people and try to advance common sense, good policy that can benefit the long term of society long after you're gone from office. Delegation, that's the case for each of us. We are truly workhorses. We care about this part of the state. We've all been through the public school system. I myself went through Hubish, Thomason, and Lawton High. And so I get it. This is home. And my mom and dad are still here. I don't see them going anywhere else. So I want to make sure that for my future kids and grandkids, this is a great place to raise them. When it comes to my specific responsibilities in the legislature, to be honest, it has been a little tough chairing the Human Services Subcommittee because of the subject matter. You're dealing with a lot of vulnerable kids and families, whether it's DHS or OJA. There's a lot going on, and it's about $1 billion budget in total. Obviously, Trey's got $14 billion plus to deal with. So we're mindful of the magnitude of this responsibility. I certainly am well aware of or childcare funding. These issues are incredibly important for our future. And if we want to have truly a top 10 economy and a competitive economy, we have to invest in these quality of life programs and services. Certainly childcare, that will be a huge topic of discussion this session. I'm sure tomorrow's budget hearing, there'll be lots of questions about what the game plan is. Because we have to get it right. I know many friends right now who are struggling when making that decision. They want to raise a family. They want kids, but right now it's very unaffordable. And that's a shame that to be placed in that predicament because we should be a pro-family state and country. So trying to deal with a lot of those questions and policy issues, it has been challenging, but I've enjoyed the people I've gotten to meet, the stories I've heard, and just this opportunity to help in a little bit of a way to make Trey's job easier, and certainly, with this budget process, making sure that it's transparent and that we're focused on the right issues at hand.
You mentioned a lot of important work y'all are working on. You also mentioned earlier on in this talk, kind of first thing, about how important it is to kind of tone down the rhetoric. Mm-hmm. Compromise is a huge word. And a lot of times that gets lost, especially when we're dealing with, let's say, with the far right, far left. People don't want to compromise. But what does compromise look like for you? What are you willing to negotiate on, and how do you decide what's non-negotiable for you?
I would remind folks that this country, because we're about to celebrate 250 years, was founded on the Great Compromise. That's how we got the bicameral system of government created with a House and a Senate. So the founders had profound disagreements on the scope of government and just in general structure of government. But at the end of the day, they're able to come together and focus on the bigger picture. And I hope that those of us in government today remember that legacy. That even if when we have disagreements on policy, that we don't attack the other person or the other party in such personal terms, where family becomes targets, whether physically or through social media. I do think family should be off limits. And certainly it does take a toll on your mental health, which isn't really talked about when it comes to those of us who are electeds. I am constantly on H.E. Bailey, going to and from the Capitol, especially as one of the subcommittee chairs, trying to meet with agency leaders and stakeholders and try to formulate plans for the session ahead. So it does take quite a bit of sacrifice on your time and energy being in this role. And that's why I'm sure you're seeing a lot of folks reluctant to step into the arena of public service. But as Teddy Roosevelt said, it's not the critic who counts, but it's the man in the arena who's trying to make an impact that counts. That's what I've been doing for the past 8 years now. So I've been as like riding a bike. When you ride a bike, you can't lean too far in either direction. You've got to stay balanced. And so I don't have all the answers. I'm not a perfect leader by any means. And so I recognize my limits. And so I like to ask questions. I like to do research and try to figure out what the best ideas are. And, as I've traveled all over the world in various capacities, people still to this day appreciate and the ideals we stand for and how we are a representative democracy with so many different viewpoints and perspectives. But for 250 years now, we've been able to keep this functioning. And I hope for the next 250 years, that continues. So long as we remember that we have more in common than not. And before we're Democrats or Republicans, we're all Americans at the end of the day. And I think growing up in the military community also helps tremendously, where we are very mission-driven. When you're in a unit, your political party, the color of your skin, your religion, what have you, you're all part of the same team. And so that's why I'm grateful that I've grown up in a community like Lawton Fort Sill, where those values have been instilled in me. And that's how I've always operated at the Capitol.
There's always disagreements every session, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the biggest disagreements are going to lie this session? Between parties, chambers, or do you think it's going to be maybe within the Republican caucus?
Oh my goodness! Like it's I've learned it's not when we're trying to make predictions ahead of a session, it's not always accurate by the end of it. But I think the dominant issue is going to be literacy. And I appreciate Superintendent Fields and his team, and it's refreshing that we are focusing on public policy again at the State Department of Education. And I do think there are some differences in how do we make sure we're improving our reading literacy rates, much like Mississippi did several years ago. There is a plan, there are ideas. Now it's a matter of what do we coalesce and find consensus on when it comes to the final bill that goes through the process. So I'm grateful that we're having a policy debate on education and not trying to be divisive and distracting ourselves from these meaningful objectives. So I would say the literacy issue will certainly be a major point of conversation, and it should be. I think you gotta make sure that kids are learning to read and then reading to learn in the long run. And I'm curious to see what comes about those conversations.
Last question for you, Daniel. If you can tell Southwest Oklahoma residents one thing that you're going to be focused on this session, you're going to only tell them one thing, what would it be?
I would say all things human services. And that would mean primarily the issue of child care funding. I think if we're going to truly be a state where people want to raise their families, where businesses want to come invest in our economy, we have to make sure that childcare funding is prioritized. What that final amount looks like, how it's going to be appropriated, those are questions that we will have to answer in the coming weeks and months. But when it comes to the issue of childcare, that's going to be one of my main areas of focus.
All right, Daniel, anything else you want to tell the viewers, listeners, anything at all?
I turned 30 this past year, so I spent most of my 20s in this leadership position. It's very humbling. And this is a place I grew up, and just being able to represent my fellow Lawtonians at the state capitol for 8 years and counting, truly, it's a meaningful experience, and I'll continue to do my best for you guys.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And you have a safe travels back up to the Capitol.
Yeah. Thank you, Justin.